nominal and contingency departures, deorbit burn, splashdown, and post-landing ops, which is what this team is preparing for now. As for the recovery teams themselves, we started the day taking a series of helicopters out to the vessel. And as standard, the recovery director and crew support teams were on that first helicopter out and took the time to get everything prepared on the ship. About 2 hours before splashdown, they deployed those fast boats and jet skis into the water. I was actually on the second helicopter out, and we were on the vessel about an hour and a half before splashdown and landed on top of the helicopter pad on the Megan. And the teams have been working diligently across their respective disciplines this week, executing what can only be described, in my point of view, as a logistical masterpiece, just ensuring every detail has been in place for Crew 9's return.
That is such great news. I'm so glad that you're able there to experience it in person. Now, can you tell us a little bit about what's next to retrieve the crew for the recovery personnel on board?
Yeah, Kate. So coming up next, Dragon will be hoisted into the on-deck translation system, or the nest, at the aft end of the ship, and then will be translated pretty quickly towards that egress platform. We'll perform another series of safety checks as final precautionary measures just to make sure there are no hypergolic vapors present before opening that side hatch. And then once that side hatch of the spacecraft is open, the crew will be assisted out of the capsule one by one from NASA and SpaceX.
Freedom, SpaceX, ComCheck.
Freedom's got you loud and clear.
Thanks, Nick. I've got you loud and clear as well. We have completed our forward link transition.
Copy.
And Jaden, if you did just want to go ahead and let us know what is next to retrieve the crew, we are continuing to get some great views on our screen, but I know you have an even better view yourself.
Oh, yeah, Sandra, this view is absolutely unbeatable. So just to kind of finish off what I was saying is once that side hatch of the spacecraft is open, that crew will be assisted out of the capsule one by one from NASA and SpaceX medical personnel, where they will then head to the med bay. And after those medical checks, they will get on that first helicopter out and arrive at the airport, where they will then board a NASA plane and then head back to Houston, Texas at the Johnson Space Center to begin their post-flight period. And we're eager to see the Crew 9 astronauts back on Earth, and we'll keep you updated on every moment of this process. With that, I'll toss it back over to you guys at Hawthorne.
Thank you so much. That was Jaden Jennings, NASA Public Affairs Officer, who watched Freedom splash down firsthand from the recovery vessel Megan. Thanks so much, Jaden. So we are continuing to get these great views on our screen here of Freedom. As we mentioned, it splashed down at 2:57 p.m. Pacific time off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida. The recovery personnel are continuing to step through procedures to hoist Dragon onto the recovery vessel Megan there, which is now coming into view. You can see just how close Megan is at this point. And that's that helicopter pad that Jaden was just discussing, where the crew will fly off of onto the coast of Florida, and then eventually they'll fly back to Houston.
Just underneath that helicopter pad is that translation deck where we will see the nest once it is loaded up with the Dragon spacecraft on board. The nest will be translated to the forward end of the recovery vessel, and that is where our Crew 9 team members will egress from the Dragon spacecraft. Now, here on your screen, we can see dolphins, actually, who want to come and play with Dragon. Now, one of the fast boats there in place, working to assist the recovery team member. It's incredible. I just love these views. We really see them even better in daytime, but just seeing the recovery team work in tandem to step through each step, to step through each operation. Obviously they're getting quick assists from the honorary part of the recovery team, those dolphins in the water there. Now, the recovery team member that is crawling around the Dragon spacecraft. Earlier, we saw a view where it was like a spider monkey pose. We can see that individual now standing in the bucket where the main parachutes were stored while Dragon was on orbit. Obviously, those main parachutes were utilized for splashdown today. They were deployed and cut from the Dragon capsule, and one of the other fast boats of the recovery team working to pull those out of the water. Now, the recovery team member that is there working on top of the Dragon capsule, earlier we saw that person performing safety checks. Now we can see some harnessing being placed around the capsule. This harnessing is what will be used to lift the Dragon capsule out of the water and onto the recovery vessel. Wow, we got a cute little pod of dolphins. It wasn't just one or two.
I mean, that water just looks beautiful. We had ideal splashdown parameters today. Obviously, wave height, ne'er a concern. The weather is beautiful, as Jaden mentioned, in the 60s, sunny. Looking forward to seeing Crew 9 exit the capsule here shortly once they get hoisted onto the recovery vessel Megan.
We can see that recovery vessel slowly but surely closing the distance there between... Oh, dolphin cam back again. We can see that the Dragon capsule and the recovery vessel, that distance is closing. Again, this is just one more step as we continue to work recovery operations for Dragon Freedom, and we anticipate the lift of the Dragon capsule to occur here in just a few minutes. Now, once all of the rigging is on the capsule and it's hooked up to the recovery vessel, we will see the hydraulic arm, which is that kind of like bridge-like structure there at the aft end of the recovery vessel. We'll see that articulate backwards, and that's a good sign that we're getting even closer to pulling the capsule out of the water. It will then move forward, and the capsule will be placed inside of what you can see there is basically a basket. We call it the nest, Dragon nest, that's where the capsule will be placed in order for it to be translated to the forward end of the vessel and for the astronauts to egress.
And before that does take place, we'll have potentially views of the rigger go ahead and jump off of the spacecraft there.
That typically occurs when the spacecraft is a little bit closer to the recovery vessel, and we usually get a really good view of that particular operation from one of the onboard cameras from the recovery vessel. That is an operation that I have a lot of respect and admiration for, that individual that does that.
So again, Dragon continuing to get closer and closer to the recovery vessel Megan. You see some of those ropes now coming into view as well. If you are just joining us, Crew 9 splashed down off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida at 2:57 p.m. Pacific time with NASA astronauts Nick Hague, Butch Wilmore, Sunny Williams, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Gorbunov. They're now working through procedures to hoist this spacecraft up onto the recovery vessel Megan.
We just saw that hydraulic arm get lowered into the lifting position. That arm will be the mechanism that is utilized to lift Dragon up and out of the water and into the nest located there at the aft end of the recovery vessel.
And the recovery vessel being used today is, as we mentioned multiple times, is named Megan, but that's actually after NASA astronaut Megan McArthur, who flew on Crew 2 a couple of years ago. We're getting some views now from actually inside the boat.
Yeah, you're exactly right. This view is straight down the recovery vessel. That platform that was closest to the camera, that is the egress platform.
Freedom, rigging is almost complete. Approximately 5 minutes until capsule lift.
Great news there from SpaceX Core. So about 5 minutes left until we see Dragon Freedom get lifted out of the water. That hydraulic arm, as I said before, is the mechanism that will lift it. It's quite swift, actually, the whole process of getting the spacecraft.
Brace for capsule lift.
Bracing.
There it goes, Dragon Freedom being lifted out of the water and onto our recovery vessel, Megan.
So once securely on...
Welcome aboard the recovery vessel. Recovery personnel are completing final checks and stand by for translation to the egress platform.
Freedom copies.
Great news there, letting us know that Dragon Freedom has been successfully recovered from the water's surface. If you've just joined us, we had an on-time splashdown at 5:57 p.m. Eastern Time, and we can now see that the water recovery operations are continuing to progress. The nest where the Dragon spacecraft is located is going to get moved forward. This will happen after one of the recovery crew members does some checks, and we'll also see some hosing. Obviously, the spacecraft splashed down in salt water. Salt water is corrosive, and we want to try and rinse out as much of the salt water as possible to reduce that corrosion on the metallic structures. So we can see some guidance there being provided, really steering the spacecraft properly into the Dragon's nest.
And it's been 30 minutes since Dragon splashed down, and as you can see there, the spacecraft is already on board the recovery vessel Megan. Things continuing to move very smoothly today throughout the entire operations from the deorbit burn up until this point as well.
And Freedom, it looks like the positioning wasn't quite right, so they are working on repositioning the capsule in the nest now.
Okay, copy that. Thanks.
And with that, the team is just going to adjust the Dragon spacecraft a bit so that it's in the right position ahead of translating up a little bit closer ahead of the side hatch. So the team is now going to step through the procedures to ensure that that takes place.
While Dragon does fly itself autonomously, it clearly is unable to park itself autonomously. We want to make sure that the Dragon capsule is properly seated there in that nest. Once Dragon is fully seated in the nest, we'll probably see a bunch of that salt water come out from the bucket there located underneath the side hatch. See some salt water splash out. As I mentioned before, one of the recovery team members will begin hosing down the exterior of the spacecraft.
So you are continuing to get some great live views on your screen of Crew 9, which includes NASA astronauts Nick Hague, Sunny Williams, Butch Wilmore, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Gorbanov, who splashed down off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida, 2:57 p.m. Pacific time this afternoon. Now working to get that spacecraft situated in the nest. Just making some final adjustments and tweaks to ensure that it's nice and secure.
Once the spacecraft is seated and secured and oriented correctly in the nest, Dragon will be moved into the hangar located underneath that helipad that we saw earlier from the aerial views during recovery.
All right, Freedom, looks like you are settled into the nest now. Team is working through hypergol sweeps.
Copy all.
Call out there telling us that the recovery team is doing the second round of those hypergolic sweeps. This helps ensure that everyone, all the recovery team members that are located basically right where this camera is located on, towards the forward end of the recovery vessel, that they will all be safe once the spacecraft is translated forward. So we're just doing some additional steps to make sure that the hypergolic propellant that is utilized for maneuvering the Dragon capsule while on orbit, making sure that none of those vapors are still present on the exterior of the capsule.
That's right. And there are a variety of individuals on board the boat that help with recovery operations. Not only do we have the recovery personnel that you see here, but we also have a doctor that will check out the crew members as standard procedure. As with any spacecraft that is returning from space, we always perform a medical check with the crew. So you will see the crew come out of the capsule and be placed on stretchers, just like with the Soyuz landing and with all of our Dragon splashdowns. That is the nominal procedure. We'll stand by to see Dragon Freedom translate or scooch up a little bit closer to the camera angle that we're seeing right here. And then teams will step through procedures to get that side hatch opened. You see it right in the dead center of your screen there. It's kind of that rectangular shape. It has not been opened since Crew 9, which included Nick Hague and Alexander Gorbanov, launched back in September from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. So that will be the very first time that hatch is opened. Once docked to the International Space Station, crew enter through the top hatch, which was where the nose cone is now closed. That's the hatch that they actually utilize to go ahead and get inside the International Space Station. So as we get a little closer to that hatch opening procedure, you might start to see more individuals come into frame for some of that support. The ship has a maximum capacity of a little over 40 people on board, and it takes a variety of different roles, as we've discussed, to support. Also on board is the chief of the astronaut office for NASA, that's Joe Acaba.
Now, while we are standing by for translation of the Dragon spacecraft to the platform there, the recovery platform that we see in the foreground, it is important to note that Nick, Sunny, Butch, and Alexander will be getting assistance from the recovery teams while exiting the spacecraft. This is the same process for any returning long-duration crew members. As you could imagine, returning to a gravity environment can wreak havoc on our vestibular system, which is responsible for maintaining balance and motion. Of course, safety is our number one priority with this operation, so we'll see the crew members helped out of the spacecraft one by one, and they will be assisted the few feet to the medical quarters aboard the boat.
And on board Dragon are three veterans space flyers. That includes Nick Hague, the commander, as well as Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams. Alexander Gorbanov is completing his very first space flight on this mission, and he completed 171 days in space along with Nick Hague.
For For those of you that have just recently joined us, well, I would encourage you to hit that rewind button and go back a few minutes. It was a beautiful splashdown of Dragon Freedom with the Crew 9 cohort on board. They had an on-time splashdown at 5:57 p.m. Eastern Time, 2:57 p.m. Pacific Time. We can see that the spacecraft...
Freedom translation is in progress.
Copy, and seal it.
We can see that spacecraft was successfully recovered from the ocean surface and is now being washed with fresh water, as obviously they splashed down in salt water. So we're trying to rinse off as much of that salt water as possible. And we can see the spacecraft continuing to move closer and closer to that recovery deck.
Freedom, the crew is working on side hatch opening now. Expect hatch open in about 2 minutes.
Okay, copy that. And Kira, just wanted to say that you guys, you and the team did an awesome job, both uphill and downhill. Just really, really impressed. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. It's been an honor.
This is a pretty exciting moment coming up. We are working to open the side hatch. One thing that may not be obvious from, just looking at the spacecraft here is that this side hatch that we're about to open, the last time it was open was when this spacecraft was at the launch pad. This side hatch is what is used for initial capsule ingress and final capsule egress, but all comings and goings from the spacecraft while it is on board the space station are from the forward hatch, which is located at the top of the spacecraft under that nose cone. So this is a pretty exciting moment because it will be the crew's first breath of fresh air since boarding their ships at the start of their journeys last year.
And the very first person that will have the opportunity to say hello to the crew once that hatch is open is a SpaceX medical recovery personnel representative. Then we'll see procedures take place to remove the footrests of Dragon. That will just help the recovery personnel get a little bit more room to access the crew and help get them out of the spacecraft.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Safety is, once again, top priority here, and removing those footrests from all 4 seats will be helpful as a SpaceX recovery team member will actually go into the capsule into Dragon Freedom to help the crew members unbuckle and stand up, and essentially we'll also see a fun little slide be put in place to help the crew members exit the spacecraft safely. So yeah, we're going to remove all 4 of those footrests to basically give a little bit more working room inside the spacecraft.
That's right. And we did hear the go for that hatch opening, so we're just a couple minutes away from being able to see that. And then we might be able to get the chance to see a couple of views inside of the Dragon and see the crew following their splashdown.
Now, opening that side hatch isn't quite like opening, the door to your car. We have to depress the seal around the side hatch, as well as, we'll now see them open that side hatch up.
And there you have it. The side hatch is open for the first time since September.
We can see some of the protective equipment there that was brought into frame that will help protect the edge of the side hatch. One, from any potential damage. Oh, we can see the recovery crew member there taking photos of the side hatch seal. This is part of the standard operation for recovery. These photos will get saved into our procedure. We'll then install that protective frame around the side hatch. This helps to ensure that the side hatch itself, the edges of it, incur no damage while crew members are coming out from the spacecraft. If you missed it, there was also a recovery team member that went inside. So there are now 5 people on board the Dragon spacecraft.
And if you are just joining us, it has not yet even been an hour since Crew 9 splashed down off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida at 2:57 p.m. Pacific time. The crew is now on board the recovery vessel Megan, and the hatch is open. The next major milestone that we'll see is when the crew will actually egress or exit the spacecraft. But before that, they'll continue to, the recovery personnel will continue to install that protective area around the hatch and then remove the footrests. So we're a couple minutes away from seeing the crew egress, but not too long away.
We'll probably see those footrests being handed out here in the near future, as I mentioned before. Oh, of course, we got to get a well-documented photo of the moment. Although we can't see it from here, I'm pretty sure there are 4 smiles on board right now.
And we did hear that report out from the commander, Nick Hague, following splashdown, that there were four smiles as far as he could see.
Yeah, capsule full of grins. Now, generally speaking...
And there we do see Crew 9, some happy waves, smiles all around back on Earth.
Generally speaking, we have the individuals in the 2 center seats of the spacecraft exit first. You might hear us refer to this as the exit process as egress. It's just another term for exiting the spacecraft. Generally speaking, we most of the time have the 2 center seats egress first, as it makes moving around inside the capsule a little bit easier. We can see the tablets that were previously located on the upper leg of the crew members. We can see those being handed out to the recovery team. Those were taken off prior to the entry phase, to spacecraft reentry. Those had to be stored and secured prior to dynamic operations.
It looks like we are starting to see the footrests also be removed. I just saw one there on the screen. There are 4, of course, 1 for each crew member.
Those footrests are made out of carbon fiber and are actually sized appropriately for each crew member, as everybody has different measurements and different leg lengths. Same goes for the armrests and the bucket length of each seat. We size those appropriately for the crew members and to ensure their comfort and safety. believe we just saw the little ramp that is used to help slide the crew members out from inside the spacecraft.
And once the crew does exit Dragon Freedom, they will be placed on to a stretcher to go to a medical bay for medical checkouts. This is standard procedure for all Dragon spacecraft flights that splash down crewed, as well as for our Soyuz spacecraft that land in Kazakhstan.
We could see the exterior of Dragon Freedom quite clearly in this shot, and it's such a beautiful sight. I personally prefer the capsule when it has some of that charring from atmospheric reentry. It is the signature sign of a capsule that has returned to Earth.
Continuing to stand by for our first crew member to egress or exit Crew Dragon Freedom following their splashdown at 2:57 p.m. Pacific time. Dragon undocked from the International Space Station at 10:05 p.m. Pacific just yesterday, so it was about 17 hours of phasing. And while on board the International Space Station, Crew 9 contributed to 900 hours of science, over 150 research experiments and investigations, making great use of the microgravity lab of the International Space Station, which celebrates 25 years of continuous human presence this November.
Looks like we're about to get our first crew member here upon egress of the Dragon spacecraft.
So we are standing by for that egress. Outside of Dragon, you do see one of those stretchers. This is the expected procedure as the crew will be taken to medical facilities following their exit from Dragon.
We can see folks on board clapping as our first crew member.
And that is NASA astronaut Nick Hague, commander of Crew 9, now out of Crew Dragon Freedom. Some smiles, thumbs up, and a wave. Can't get any better than that.
Yeah, that is one happy camper, that's for sure. As we said before, it is standard procedure for all of our long-duration crew members to receive assistance upon egressing from the spacecraft. We basically help them move off of the recovery deck and into the private medical quarters for their initial consultation with the SpaceX flight surgeon. So we'll see that take place for all 4 of our crew members today.
And we are standing by for the next crew member to exit Freedom. Next up out of the capsule, we expect Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Gorbunov's first space flight. Spent 171 days in space alongside NASA astronaut Nick Hague.
Looks like we're getting some cheers and clapping on board as Alexander is slid down the little ramp and placed into the mobility aid. Once again, big smile.
Now, the two crew members remaining in Dragon are NASA astronauts Sunny Williams and Butch Wilmore. They completed 286 days in space.
One of the remaining footrests being removed from the Dragon spacecraft. As I said before, we generally try to have the crew members that are located in the two center seats aboard Dragon, and we like to have them egress first if possible, as it creates a little bit more movable working room inside the spacecraft. There is a recovery crew member inside that is helping all of our Crew 9 crew egress or exit from the spacecraft.
We are standing by for the next crew member to egress or exit Crew Dragon Freedom following the splashdown not even an hour ago at 2:57 p.m. Pacific time. Really have the recovery operations down pretty quick at this point.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible to think that just 5 years ago when we were doing the initial demonstration missions of the Dragon for Crew Dragon, that now we're under about 30 minutes for, to retrieve the spacecraft from the water, and just several minutes here while it's been on board and to get everyone, really to get that side hatch open.